It's true what they say, you can have too much of something, and 1.3 of Wuthering Waves was exactly that for me. But why? Well, I'll tell you, by running down my thoughts on the story, the characters, the events, and then giving 1.3 a nice overall score out of 5. Here we go. Now look, I'm about to shock so many people, or at least I think I am, okay? I did not like 1.3 story all that much, right? And there's a super simple reason to it. Too much lore dumping. We go from knowing tidbits about Rover's past to suddenly knowing pretty much everything now, and that's a wild jump from 1.1 to 1.3. We now know that Rover was the leader of the Black Shores, which, let's be honest here, became more and more obvious as more Black Shores members took a vested interest in us. Shorekeeper steered the ship whilst we were gone, she's tied to the Tethys system, and the biggest gripe that I have about this story is really simple. Shorekeeper loves Rover. Look, okay, I'm all for romance arcs in games. I mean, after all, when done right, a romantic relationship can lead to some great moments and story beats, but in a game like this, you aren't making Shorekeeper a love interest because it will hold weight in the story, you're doing it to sell her to the players more. Which I think is a massive disconnect. I think is a massive problem, right? If you're disregarding interesting story beats for what's gonna sell, then that's a problem. And look, nuance activated, she only asks if the feeling she's feeling is love, which could be a platonic thing, a love that you have for close friends, but I think we all know why that moment existed. Not lore, but sales. Nothing wrong with this, you know, Kuro, get your bread up, but it does feel a little bit forced, regardless of any lore going into this moment. Right, don't get me wrong though, right? There are some cool moments in this story. The cutscenes are great, Alto had so much more depth to him and that's exactly what he needed. And the story beats did hit at times, okay? It's nice to learn about Rover, but I can't help but feel that we went from breadcrumbs to the full loaf way too quickly. And it sours my mood on what should be a fantastic slow reveal of lore. And also, just for, you know, future reference, the cutscenes, man, for this update in particular, are incredible. The cutscenes are so good, they're really well done, and they add a lot to the story. Who do we have to talk about for this one? 2 characters? Let's just chuck in Alto, why not? 3 characters to run down, and honestly, this one's gonna be rough, I'm not gonna lie. Alright, let's get the elephant out of the way, rip the band-aid off. Shorekeeper is okay. Just okay. Her voice acting is solid throughout, her design is alright, but I couldn't help but feel like I was missing something that everyone else saw. Because from what I've seen, people love Shorekeeper, and I just don't see that. She isn't a bad character by any means, but I feel like to a degree, she has been overhyped, and therefore my overall thoughts on her have suffered because of that. I went into the story with my expectations high for Shorekeeper, expecting massive plot twists, but I got left with a slab of lore dump and a character that still loves us despite us leaving the Black Shores for an undisclosed amount of time. It just feels like there were some loose ends that were tied up in a weird way, and I really do think that maybe if they tightened the story a little bit, maybe if they went back and maybe tweaked the story just a little bit more, and maybe had a little bit more tension going on between Shorekeeper and Rover leading to that final moment, that maybe that would have been a bit more of an impactful scene. This is my homie, this will always be my homie, okay? This story has made Alto an even better character, and I didn't even think that was possible going into this, alright? It's pretty obvious that the intelligence broker with a goofy demeanor is somewhat played up so that he can get what he needs from people, because in this story, whilst he still had that Alto charm about him, he had an element of seriousness to him that I don't think a lot of people expect to see from him. If the story did one thing right, it was giving Alto more depth and allowing him to shine on his own. This is a character that is just going to continue to get better the more we put into the story, okay? So let's just keep putting Alto into the story, and yeah, I mean, he's already probably my favorite character in Wuthering Waves, but you know what? Let's make him even more of my favorite character. My initial thoughts were that Youhu is going to become my least favorite character, and whilst there isn't much to talk about when it comes to her, I think my initial thoughts were wrong. She's not a good or great character yet. She really hasn't been around enough for her to warrant any of that or any like major judgment, but so far I think she'll be a fine addition to the stories as we progress, as long as she stays in this sort of she's there for 10 minutes and then she kind of disappears again, or if she is in the story for a long time, it's not an annoying presence that feels unwanted. Nuance to this, nuance to this. Gacha events strike again. Look, I try not to sound like a broken record, but it's hard to when the record being played hasn't been changed in months. Wuthering has had a good history of really good events, okay? There is a mixture of events that are just mindless fun and grinding for Astrite, events that require you to lock in, but for 1.3, it's leaned way too heavily on just mindless filler events for my liking. Go to a place, take a photo or do this thing, here's 40 Astrite. Do these tasks, get material on Astrite. Do random side missions, spin the wheel, get summons. It's just tricky to enjoy this when it's all I can do for one patch. It really made me not want to play the game, and I didn't really this time around, alright? I blitzed through the story, explored the Black Shores just a little bit, did some of the events, and then called it a day. And I'm going to keep it real, at time of writing and at time of recording, I still haven't claimed all my free summons yet. That's the price for not having events I can sink my teeth into. It just makes booting up the game a little bit trickier, you know? I think I've just accepted that most gacha patches are gonna be do the story and then just look at the events for the review type deal, because man, I miss having events that were either fun or lock-in worthy, you know? I didn't even do a review for it, but I ragged on 1.2, but at least the Moon Chasers Festival event was fun, right? Like, 1.3 doesn't offer what I want events-wise, and you know what? That's okay. I'm just one guy, and if you like these events, all the more power to you. For full transparency, I wrote this script on the same day I wrote my Zenless Zone Zero 1.2 review, and the difference in depth when it comes to my thoughts is very staggering, I won't lie. It feels as though Wuthering Waves just hasn't been hitting like it once did, and maybe it's the story, maybe it's me, maybe it's bias because Chong-Li was in 1.1, and 1.1 was a great story, and then you have Chong-Li's companion quest, which was just top notch. It's always going to be tricky to top 1.1 in my personal opinion, but if you guys noticed, I didn't even do a review video on 1.2 of Wuthering, because that update just felt so empty. But here's the problem. 1.3 is kind of the opposite. The story isn't empty, it's too full. Think of it like a sandwich with like 100 slices of ham in it. It's too much, too quickly, and there's just not enough time to digest everything. Even now, as I was typing this up, I'm still trying to remember the minute details, and just can't because of how fast all of the story progressions and the story beats went. I feel like this is going to be quite a harsh rating, but Wuthering's 1.3 story is going to get a 2.75 out of 5 for me. It's a very middle of the road, you'll get some enjoyment out of it, but it's nothing wild, and, you know, there are better ways to spend your time. And the patch as a whole is going to get a 3 out of 5. This is a rough patch for me personally, but looking at trailers and such for 1.4, I hope, and I in some ways know, that this will likely change, and 1.4 is going to be way better for me. It's difficult for me to connect with a story when the main talking point isn't my cup of tea. And with Shorekeeper under-delivering in my expectations, it's hard to connect with a story with a character that was hyped for so long, and everyone was like, oh, you know, Shorekeeper's great, and I play it. It's just not, it's not what I was expecting. However, 1.4 has Camellia. It's all about Camellia. I'm worried I won't get her, which would suck, but honestly, that's a topic for another day. Let me know what you all think about 1.3. Do you agree? Disagree? Think I was too harsh? Wasn't harsh enough? Who's getting on their trusty steed and defending Shorekeeper's honor against me? I don't know. But anyways, see ya.